Ranked choice voting. Ranked choice voting has come to Albuquerque before the Albuquerque City Council. And lo and behold, guess what 7 of the 9 councilors said?
And if this goes to the voters, I will definitely be supporting ranked choice voting.
Has unfolded. I was convinced back then, when the advocates came to speak to me, that this was the right way to go.
I really don't, I really can't support the ranked choice voting at this time.
I think when you have the voters vote on it, and I always support going to the voters.
Well, I'm not opposed to ranked choice voting.
Ranked choice voting gives those folks a real chance to run a campaign, to be viable, to build coalitions and do that work, and I think that helps democracy an awful lot better.
So, you know, I like ranked choice voting.
Here, I just think some of our arguments against this or for this are maybe a little misplaced. Thank you, Madam President.
I think it should go to the voters and...
Sounds great, doesn't it? So why in the hell didn't a bill pass that night? Tune in to find out more. So Monday, March 17th, Albuquerque City Council had a meeting. They had a big agenda full of items, and 2 items that were on the ballot of great import are, as I led in here, about ranked choice voting. Ranked choice voting is a system where, I'm going to say it very quickly, a system where you don't just vote for one person when you go to run. You vote for your first, second, third, fourth choice, and then there's a way of sorting it out so that eventually someone wins with 50% plus, and everyone really gets a say and blah blah blah. But you know what? I'm not gonna speak anymore, because I took the 1 hour of public testimony and created like a 5-minute montage of people explaining what our problems are, what ranked choice voting is, why it works, and what we can do with it. And I was so impressed with the public comment that happened that night from the people supportive of ranked choice voting. So let's go right to that.
Runoff elections are sort of a huge pain. A lot of the times people have to settle. People have to choose for the lesser of 2 evils when they vote. It's tiresome, it suppresses voter morale, and it's extremely discouraging.
Second election in the season of the holidays is going to create a drop-off in people.
We know that we need to have the voter participation, and we also know that the second time around on the runoff that we have a dramatic plummet in the amount of participation.
RCV would not be a dramatic change to our present runoff system, as some have claimed.
I think RCV is simply the most effective and efficient, especially monetarily, way to implement the will of the people.
Compressing the election to 1 day is the most respectful and efficient use of voters' time and taxpayer money. Money is what I want to talk about. And from what I understand, we could either spend somewhere between $290,000 on a runoff election, or we could spend $1 million, or the option I like best is nothing.
Let's honor, for those of you who pride themselves on fiscal responsibility, vote for this. It's a no-brainer. It's fiscally responsible.
Just want to comment that on average, cities that implement ranked choice voting have an increase in turnout of 10% over cities that have not implemented ranked choice voting. It encourages voting. It doesn't depress turnout.
Ranking someone, my preference of vote seems a lot easier than getting my taxes done, and frankly, I find a little offense that we're so worried about how we're going to teach the community about this. I mean, it really is, whether it is in Spanish or in English, it's as easy as uno, dos, tres.
So there are your 5 flavors: cherry, orange, pineapple, raspberry, and watermelon.
Since we had heard concerns that seniors might have a hard time understanding RCV, we asked folks to indicate their age on the ballot as well. In all, we collected 91 ballots from folks between the ages of 5 and 85. And what we learned from doing this is that not only are voters of all ages able to figure it out, but most of them like it a lot.
Of all the reasons to support ranked choice voting, one stands out in my mind, and that is I've always been concerned about the concept of vote splitting.
People can vote for their favorite candidate without worrying that it might end up with the candidate that they sure don't want to win.
Another reason why ranked choice voting voting is a wonderful option to young people is because we want to see candidates seek out not just their first choice candidate, but also being okay with being the second choice candidate. Seek out a broader base of supporters. And we want to see that. Young people want to see candidates reach out to us, not just their constant voter populace, but also the new voters.
One thing that's already been shown in the city of Santa Fe is that during campaign season, the amount of negative campaigning that goes on in campaigns drastically is reduced under a ranked choice voting system. This is healthy for democracy. That way we're not treating each other like mortal enemies, but just having different opinions on the floor of politics.
Whereas ranked choice voting brings out civility, which I think we need a lot more of in our democracy. And that might take care of the voter apathy too.
I have family in St. Paul. I have friends in Minneapolis, and they love ranked choice voting.
The state of Maine has gone so far as to elect their congressional representatives by ranked choice voting. And I don't think of Maine as a radical place.
25 years ago, myself and another band of Green Party members had as part of their platform IRV, instant runoff voting. That's a quarter of a century ago in '94. We had talked with some city councilors about instant runoff voting at that time. This is not a new idea.
A strong democracy requires the willingness to evaluate and improve the way that we make the voice of the people heard.
I deeply believe that Albuquerque should show leadership in adopting election laws that lead to more representative outcomes.
And to say, oh no, we can't do this, voting is important, but the voters decided and told you already that they wanted a majority. This is just another way to get the majority vote.
What I wanted to touch on today is this concern about whether there's enough time to educate the voters on this. I led the effort in Santa Fe in partnership with the city to get that voter education campaign going. We had about 8 weeks to do it, and we got it done in Santa Fe in a very successful way. 65% of the voters in Santa Fe marked all 5 rankings on their mayoral ballot, which shows me that people really got it, right? People got into the concept of ranking their candidates. And we did see a 10% voter turnout increase.
People have figured out better ways of doing democracy. Let's honor that. And by the way, there's no system created that takes away the inherited advantages that incumbents have. Ranked choice voting won't do that. You're all safe. Please vote yes.
Yeah, that's right. If you thought you saw me there, just spiffy it up a little bit extra. That was me. I was there. I was part of the gallery of people who gave their own comment. And the reason why I don't show up to a lot of city council meetings, but I did for this one, because electoral reform to me is one of the most important thing that we can be doing right now to bring better democracy, better representation, and crack the failed, broken methods that we have of electing representation that create a lot of other problems. Ranked choice voting is not the cure for cancer in this thing. It's just one of many things that needs to be done. But it's one of the most attainable things right now because it doesn't require a change in the voting machines. It doesn't require a change in a lot of things. And I loved the collective wisdom of all of the people who testified, because he basically laid out the framework and even answered some of the concerns that our city councilors had over using this system. Maria Perez from Fair Vote, New Mexico, Fair Vote and Common Cause, she talked about the ramp up, the training, the 8 weeks that they had to go before the Santa Fe election, and getting the public, getting campaigns and everyone else on board with RCV. And actually, after she gave her testimony, there were 3 different city councilors that asked her a follow-up question from her testimony, and then she replied to those. There was really nobody else that had a situation like that, except for one person. This person, who also is with Common Cause. She's 19 years old, and gave a great speech, of which I had a small clip at the beginning there. When she was finished, though, there was something that happened that was very different than what happened with Maria Perez.
Excuse me.
Thank you, ma'am. This isn't going to be a question, just a statement. I find it interesting that you want to have choices. You don't want to have choices. You want to do this, and yet you don't want to go out and choose this or this or this, and yet you want a list of choices for ranked choice voting. Isn't that a little contradictory, what you just said on how to do this? I don't need an answer. I just want to state I thought maybe I wasn't listening or paying attention, but if you can't make a decision, I'm sorry, that's rather rude to make those noises. We don't make noises of you.
Well, no, Councilor Jones. You say that you don't make noises at us, and yet actually the very maneuver you just pulled right there is very indicative of nearly the same thing, except from your privileged position of power. You finished listening to this person's testimony, and then you said, I'm only going to make a statement. I'm not going to ask a question. Then you proceed to ask a question. So when the person who made the comment comes back getting ready to answer your question that you asked, you're like, no. I don't want a response. Well, that's a crappy move. That's a power play. It's baloney. If you didn't want an answer, you shouldn't have asked a question. You should have left it as a statement, but you didn't. And then you weren't willing to listen to the response. It tells me a lot about where your head is at this council meeting for the evening. But that's not all in the area of irregularities and public comment. So the public comment phase finishes, and what happens next? We come back from the dinner break. They went through and exhausted the entire list of names, the people that signed up specifically to comment on 054. There was a list for general public comment, and there's an agenda item for general public comment, and it's usually done early in the whole thing, but they rearranged the schedule to put this up front. So general public comment ends up happening over an hour and a half later in the meeting. But something odd happened on the way back at the beginning of coming back from the dinner break.
Actually, there was another person on general public comment that had signed up to speak on ranked choice voting, and he is Stefan Baca.
So before I get into this testimony, it's interesting what President Pena said. General public comment about 054, and here's the interesting thing. General public comment is different than comment from 054. And I was able to obtain the sign-in sheets for 054. Stephen Baca's name is not on the list to comment on 054. He is on the list to comment on general public comment, but this is not the general public comment phase. So my question is, number one, why is he commenting now when it's not time for general public comment? And number two, since he didn't write down what he was commenting about in the document in general public comment, you can say what topic, and it was blank. How in the world does President Pena know what he wants to talk about, even though he'd be talking out of turn because he's not on the right sign-up list? I'm going to let you stew on that for a second and listen to the comment that comes.
Hello, good evening, Council. I'm Stephen Baca. I'm running in Council District 2 against Isaac Benton. Is voting. I don't have an opinion on it. The issue I have is that we're passing it in the middle of an election cycle. This is complete and utter cheating beyond belief.
So what's happened here is he's a candidate for District 2 City Council, Isaac Benton's district. Isaac Benton is the incumbent city councilor. He's actually got right now, it looks like there's going to be 4 or 5 people in this race, of which Stephen Baca is going to be one. He's someone who did not ask for public financing. He's going completely on private financing, and he seems to have an in with Clarissa Pena, which also, as I'm going to explain in a little bit, means he's probably got an in with Ken Sanchez as well. And he came on to just specifically attack Isaac Benton and Pat Davis. He referenced a blog posting from Pete Donnelly that was titled that Benton and Davis, it's my job to ensure my reelection. citing that somehow ranked choice voting is an incumbent protection program. And that's what he says. He accuses them of cheating. And he brings up the objection of changing election rules in the middle of an election cycle that's already in progress. So that is why he showed up here. And he showed up after the break. And it's completely out of order. And it looks highly suspicious for me. So what I would tell you all is keep an eye on this Stephen Baca, on what he says, and what comes out, rolls out in the campaign in City Council District 2. Because if I had to lay money down right now, I would tell you that Santa Lena is going to be all over Stephen Baca. And they basically, they showed their cards at this council meeting. You know, they tried to sneak him in because there was nobody else who got snuck in. There was no one else who made the mistake of signing the public comment thing when they wanted to comment on 054. Nobody. There was this big long list. So I don't have all the facts right now, but my spider sense is going off really hard, and it's tingling right at Stephen Baca and of course the other players who allowed him to speak right then and there. So there we go. That's just the public comment phase, and that's how far we got here, right? So far. Whew. Now it's time for the councilors. I'm not going to play all of the things that everyone said. I'm mainly going to focus on the people who were against this bill and one special case. But I'm going to play the entire bit from Ken Sanchez, because I believe that he is the leader of what I call the West Wall of Democrats. And this is, if you've seen my videos where I talk about the Donkey Fan coalition in the state Senate, where conservative Democrats ally with Republicans to take a majority control of the Senate and run their conservative agenda. I have a card up there you can click on to watch a video that explains that in detail. But that kind of duopoly can still occur in a, quote, nonpartisan office body like the city council. So city council races, they're not run on, people don't have their party labels or everything, but we all know. We know. In fact, Ken Sanchez in his last campaign had an outside expenditure group that put up giant billboards that says he's the only real Democrat in this race. And yet you come to find that this only real Democrat, plus the other two West Side Democrats, Clarissa Pena and Cynthia Borrego, have a interesting proclivity to all vote together, to all vote against the more progressive members of the council, garnering the Donkey Fan label from me. But the seasoned politician, the one who's been at it the longest, is Ken Sanchez. And I'm going to play his whole little bit right now for a very important reason.
Thank you, Madam President. I like the fact that the amendment will basically now say that there is no conflict of interest, because I felt with the current legislation, I was very conflicted with it because I felt that you can't change the rules in the middle of an election. I mean, the expectation of these voters coming in expect the rules that are in place to be in place when they are running for the office. Districts 2, 4, 6, and 8 are now up for re-election. And there are candidates that are running. I know in Councilor Davis's place, it won't make any difference because there are 2 candidates. But let's keep in mind, back in March 11th of 2013, there was a special election that went to the voters. 57,939 voters in this city voted on this mail-in ballot. And this was in reference to before you needed 40% or more to win the election without a runoff. And the citizens of Albuquerque went out and said, we want to increase that number to 50%. To be elected to office, you should have the majority. And 32,055 people, which was 55.33% of the voters, voted to make sure that the percentage went up from 50% to 40%. I mean, they voted for the runoffs And basically, that's why we have runoffs today, because if you didn't have 50%, you were going to be in a runoff. I know that there was a cost to the runoffs, and I have no problems with ranked choice voting. I think it's a good thing for Albuquerque and local and municipal elections. I just think the timing, especially with that amendment in there, is really problematic.
So I'm hearing a bunch of stuff here. One thing he's talking about is the voters. We decided in 2013 to move the line to where there has to be a runoff to 50%. It used to be if you got 40% plus one vote, you got in, and you didn't need a runoff. Now you need 50 plus 1% to not have a runoff. And what he's trying to say here is that the voters have created these rules, and he's not comfortable. In a closing speech that was almost exactly like this, he said that he felt it would be disenfranchising the voters to have the council vote in ranked choice voting, except that there's no difference here, because in the ranked choice voting system offered, you have to get 50% of the vote plus one to become the elected official. And if you don't, there's a runoff. And there might be 2 or 3 runoffs, all contained within the same day. But that notion that somebody's got to get to 50 to be our representative is intact. There's actually no conflict here between ranked choice voting and 50% and then have a separate election. The only thing we're changing is we're not having a separate election. We get it all done in the same night, so that you're not trudging around. And now that our elections have been moved to November, they're scheduling the runoff for December 15th. Do you know how crazy it is to try to get people to there's so much going on in the middle of the holidays that it's insanity in a sense not to have ranked choice voting to get this all over with at the beginning of November. Now, okay, so that's his speech, and he's giving his viewpoints and his side of the thing, except there was also something. There were two things that I heard. One at the beginning of his little comment, and one at the end. And it kind of made me do a double take. Let's rerun the 2 comments that I'm talking about here real quick.
I like the fact that the amendment will basically now say that there is no conflict of interest.
And now for something completely different.
I just think the timing, especially with that amendment in there, is really problematic.
You're very grateful that amendment's in there. The amendment's in there. When he's talking about the amendment, there was an amendment to this bill to say that we're not going to make it happen in 2019. We're going to make ranked choice voting happen starting in 2021. So that way, the argument about changing the rules in the middle of the election is gone. The rules will then change in 2021. Everyone's going to have an extra 2 years to prepare for this. There's no changing of the rules in the middle of the election cycle. And so there you go. And now Ken Sanchez, having one of his objections removed, ends up tripping over his own words. He can't keep his own lies straight. And this is classic Ken Sanchez, because Ken Sanchez tries to be everything to everyone. So you'll notice he talks about how terrible the bill is and how disenfranchising it is, and all these other things. But then he says, "I like ranked choice voting and I actually support it." This is classic Ken Sanchez double talk, and double talk is one of his specialties. And the reason why I say that he's sort of the puppet master of the West Wall of city councilors is because when you listen to some of his testimony during his statements, and then those of Councilor Borrego and Pena, this is what you get.
I think it's a good thing for Albuquerque and local and municipal elections.
And while I'm not opposed to ranked choice voting, I just want to say for myself is that, I really think it's an interesting concept. I think it's something that I'm not necessarily opposed to.
And this.
Felt that you can't change the rules in the middle of an election.
I think the timing is, a little strange. And I just don't think that it's something that, we need at this time.
Do you notice how much lack of eye contact there is while all three of these people talk. Ken Sanchez has the most eye contact of all three of them. But it is pretty clear that I am going to say all of these things from the bottom of my heart. It is something I completely believe in. I mean, give me a break. If this is totally orchestrated. Now, you can't be 100% orchestrated. They can't say exactly everything that Ken Sanchez says. They got to do a little bit of ad-libbing on their own. Otherwise, someone might be suspicious. Someone other than me who's not paying direct attention. Let's check out some of the ad-libbing from councilors Borrego and Pena.
And in a democracy, it's a basic right, like eating and drinking water and, you know, all, I mean, I really believe it's a basic right. And people have fought for generations, women, I mean, you know, all sorts of people for their right to vote. And ranked choice voting is actually, it's an electoral college system.
It's confused.
Well, we all can't be the quarterback now, can we? You got to take the allies as you can. But honestly, an electoral college system, that's completely wrong. And Councilor Borrego looks like she's never had to talk about the idea of voting in her life. And that may be true. It may or may not be true, but boy, that's just what it sounds like. Poor Sanchez. Well, as long as you can get the votes right, then everything's going to be okay. But it's not sounding too good for ranked choice voting just being enacted by the council, even with the amendment to push it back 2 years. So let me show you, like when you're in opposition to a bill, and you don't have to read from a script because you've already got a political center, and you can use that political center then to respond to what's going on. Now, in the case like this, you know, this is in opposition. This is going to be Councilor Trudy Jones, who's a very conservative member of the council, and it's apparent that she is jaundiced about ranked choice voting. But notice the difference between the way she opposes this bill and the way the West Wall donkey fans are opposing this bill.
Our obligation is free citizens of the United States of America to register to vote and to vote. So with that, that's all.
That's right. It's freedom, it's democracy, and freedom and democracy demands that you vote every single time. And if there's another vote, you vote on it. And by the way, why don't you take off your shoes and walk backwards uphill at least a mile to go vote for whoever you have. And don't complain about it either. And if we have another runoff, take your shoes off, walk backwards, and go 2 miles to the next polling station and vote. Because, you know, if there isn't pain involved with voting, then it's not really freedom and democracy. Don't let technology or anything else, you know, make democracy more open and accessible. Now, while I don't agree with Trudy Jones, at least this is someone here who demonstrates that they, like I said, have a political center. They know where they're at. They know who they are. They know what they're about. And they know how they're going to respond to this kind of stuff. And I doubt that Trudy Jones deals with election law any more than councilors Pena or Borrego or or some others. So this is just a contrast to show you really the difference and the trap that donkey fans put themselves into, because basically they're Republicans and they do Republican work, and yet they have to pretend to be Democrats, and it creates this weird sort of twisted energy, and we see it at play all night long during these proceedings. So here we are. We've heard from 4 people who I don't think are that favorable to the ranked choice voting proposal, even with the amendment, although Ken Sanchez still holds out a light of hope that with this, although he did and then he didn't. So he's both a yes and a no vote at this point. Now, one other person to speak. This bill was sponsored by Councilors Davis on the far left there, ironically, from the Southeast Heights, Councilor Ike Benton, 2 seats over to the right from the North Valley, and Councilor Brad Winter, who's on the far right, who's from the far northern heights of Albuquerque. Now, he's going to come to speak on this bill with ranked choice voting, now with proposed with the amendment to push it back to 2021. This is his bill. So let's see what the champion of this bill has to say.
Thank you, Madam President. And this is a tough one, and I did not agree that it should be on this ballot because I think there needs to be a lot of education that happens with the residents and our residents in District 4.
So that sounds good, because this amendment's going to push it back 2 years, right, Councilor Winter?
In saying that, now we pushed it down the road a little bit, and sometimes through my years working with the council, I have trouble supporting something that maybe a different council should vote on. So another one is about have the voters vote on.
Oh my God. So now you get what you want, and now you don't get what you want? You mean you want to be able to vote, have the vote later, but not if there's going to be a change in councilors? You all in the council vote all the time for stuff that happens beyond the term expectancies of councilors. You vote for industrial revenue bonds for 10 or more years. You vote for spending in things that occur. You encumber future councils with the budgets and the bond loads and other things for decades. And now you have a problem? This is, I think, is a very weak. This is the weakest of all the objections to RCV being implemented. Wow, what a champion for a bill you are, Brad Winter. And then now you're talking about having the other. There's another proposal to just put this on the ballot to have the voters vote on it. What do you have to say to that?
Yes, and there's issues on both sides. I think when you have the voters vote on it, and I always support going to the voters. But this is kind of a new thing. If something happens, then you can't make there's unintended consequences. Sometimes it's tough to make changes without going back to the voters. So it's kind of a dilemma right now. But those are some of the issues that I'm looking at. What do we do?
I didn't want it now. I wanted it later. And now that I got it later, I don't want it then. But I could give it to the voters. But I usually like giving it to the voters. But I'm afraid to give it to the voters. So that's where I'm at. So from a guy who said that he's supportive of ranked choice voting and he's even supportive of always giving things like this to the voters, he's completely like taken himself out of the game. The weakest. This is a. So what I would say is this is an example of someone that doesn't have a political center and is displaying it adequately. He's not running for re-election again, and I hope that his replacement has a little bit more backbone than what we just witnessed here. So at this point, we get to the vote.
All those in favor say yes and raise your hand.
And there you go. We only get 4 votes. And notice really carefully what we've got here. We've got Sanchez, we have Pena, and we have Borrego. The West Wall speaks. The West Wall is not going to side with Benton and Davis. How's that blue working out for you? And then there's Winter. He is voting yes. So we have councilors Winter and Gibson on the right that are from the Heights, a Republican and a Democrat. We have 2 Democrats, Benton and Davis, voting yes. But 4 is not enough in a council of 9. From here, things dissolve pretty quickly. After the ordinance to just place ranked choice voting as the system, and then as amended and make it an act in 2021, goes down in a 4-5 vote. There's the next item on the agenda, which is to let the voters have a vote on it in the November election in 2019, and they can vote yes or no. And again, while we saw that there was a much bigger support for the idea of the voters voting on it, where possibly even Ken Sanchez might be for it. Don Harris stated in here and there in some quick clips during the night that he supported giving it to the voters. When that item came up, immediately there was a call for an amendment to that item. And Don Harris was involved with that and trying to get it so that the city clerk could bring up recommendations for changes to the way the system counts or does other things at a later date if the voters vote on it. It would give the city clerk and or the council the ability to manipulate the rules after the voters have had their say. And here's the crazy thing, is that because it's not an ordinance, it's a change to our city charter, unlike what Councilor Gibson did, where she put in a floor amendment and they voted on the amendment and then voted on the whole bill. When it's a charter amendment, you have to have 2 hearings on it. And there was some discussion whether this one gets to count as one of them. But there's no council meetings in July. So we have August, I believe it's the 4th, and August 5th and August 24th, I believe, are the 2 dates. There'll be a council meeting. And if they don't pass the proposal to have a vote on this, then the 70-day window that you need to put something on the ballot will be gone. So I'm still wondering whether someone isn't trying to run out the clock on this thing and make it so that there's not even a vote in November. And that would be a complete disaster. So for all of my listeners who live in the city of Albuquerque, please call your counselor and tell them that you completely want this thing put on the ballot. And even forget about amendments if possible. Let's just put it on the way it was written and have a vote. You can call the other city councilors as well. And I would recommend you call them from around. And if you live on the west side, basically on the west side, Pena's District 3 is mostly south of Central. District 1 is about from Central to Montano, and District 5 is north of Montano. So depending on which one, go call your counselor, especially from those 3 districts, and let them know that you're one of their constituents. You definitely support ranked choice voting, and you want it on this ballot. We need to flood the phones. We need to hit the emails. I've got the number below for the general city council, the councilors' offices, and they can direct you to the appropriate place. This is critical for us to have a good democracy, and anything and everything you all can do to help make that happen is what we need in our city. And we can be an example. Santa Fe and Las Cruces already have ranked choice voting. This is not controversial anymore. It's only amongst these donkey fans that they perceive a problem. Let's get to action. Thank you very much for watching this video. Let me tell you something. There were technical difficulties with this video, and then also making this video was long, arduous process. There's like 3.5 hours of raw footage to get the montage together to really accurately display all the good issues about RCV. It took forever. It was a labor of love. I care deeply about this issue, and I feel like this is critically important, which is why I took the time and effort to do this. But it takes lots of time and effort. Please consider becoming one of my Patreons at www.patreon.com/duopoly report and become one of my $5 a month contributors or more. And actually, you can contribute less if you can't contribute $5 a month. But every dollar that you help support me with gives me more time to bring a quality product out to you. By the way, good news, we're over 100 YouTube subscribers, so I now have a customized YouTube URL at www.youtube.com/c/The Duopoly Report. And that all happened because you subscribed to my YouTube channel and you told your friends to subscribe to your YouTube channel. Please continue to do that. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. When I get to 1,000 subscribers, I will be able to do a lot more good things than I'm even doing now. Have a good day.